So today we are going to go through processing portraits. Specifically, we're going to start with just simple, quick processes, and then we're going to slowly move into the more advanced things. We're not going to do completely advanced stuff, but we are going to look at some more selective edits that you might want to do. But if you're not interested in that, the first photo that we're going to go through is just going to be a quick edit to make it look as best as it can, and then the next photos will get more complex as we go on. So we're just going to start by looking at a pretty simple photo that we probably just want to clean up a little bit, and it's a portrait photo, but it has some other elements in it. The main thing here that we're probably looking at with this picture is it's a little bit overexposed in the skin, so we're going to look at kind of recovering some of that skin tone and just making it have a little bit more vibrancy, a little bit brighter. Then we will go into a second photo, which we will focus in on brightening the eyes, trying to make those pop a little bit more, showing a little bit more contrast, and so on. And then the final photo, we're going to do some more edits on skin here, brightening the eyes again, but then also talking about if a client asks for removal of any blemishes, we can do that in for this class or this video. I'm using Lightroom. I'm also going to be using Photoshop for the more advanced one. So again, the stuff that I do in Lightroom, you're going to be able to do in pretty much every processing software that is available. The stuff that I will be doing in Photoshop, there are other alternative software that you can use that will have the same effect. So I'm just using this out of the sake of it's what I'm using the most. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So here we go. So like I said, with this first photo, you'll notice that there's a little bit of extra brightness in the skin. So we'd like to recover some of the skin tone. It's a little bit flat, maybe even a little bit out of focus. So we're just going to try to make it pop a little bit and then also bring some contrast back. So when you're dealing with a portrait, the most important thing here, two things really. So you want to keep them lively, keep them looking human and not, uncanny valley, if you will. And then also you don't want to overdo it unless, of course, you're doing like a Comic-Con, cosplay edit where you want it to look like a cartoon. But for the most part, you want to keep everything subtle, simple, and clean. That way the subject looks the best that they can look, and you're not overdoing it to the point where they don't even look human anymore. So with this picture here, the couple things that I would want to do is I would want to bring back some of the skin tone. There's a couple shadows under the glasses that I would, if I were really going at this one, I would probably work to remove with some selective edits. But for the sake of today, the simple edit, we're really just going to be looking at color correction and exposure correction. So like you saw in the previous lesson, we know that we can kind of build from the top bottom when we are processing things here. So for example, with this, we probably want to start with white balance like we did in the previous video, and we can adjust manually. I think that made it a little too pink, so I'm going to adjust it. Now, the one thing that you need to keep in mind when you're doing these kinds of adjustments on a portrait is you want to keep an eye on the skin tone. Everybody has an undertone to their skin. Everybody's undertone is slightly different. It helps if you can figure out your customer or your subject's undertone. So for example, this undertone is a little bit yellow, a little bit olivey. This undertone is quite pink. And this undertone is like a lighter, I would say almost like an orange. And this one is like a red undertone. So if you can kind of pinpoint that a little bit, it helps you when you are correcting those the skin tone later. So the first thing I would say is that maybe it's a little bit too bright. As you saw, if you watched the previous video, I like to work in curves. But just for the sake of expedience and showing you some tricks here, I'm actually going to go into the luminance. Luminance does a great job of correcting skin tone and bringing skin tone back if it's become washed out, or bringing some life back into it if it's become muddied. So for a lot of people, what they do is, they'll have a preset. So for example, the Masson Labs are quite popular. Let me just throw a preset on there just so you can see. So, not a fan of the contrast here, but the main thing I want to show you is that the skin tone is completely shot now. It's all washed out. If I pull back on the luminance, you can see I can start to get some skin tone back there. Like I said, I don't love this preset. I didn't know what that would look like on here, but I just wanted to kind of give you an example, because that's a pretty normal workflow for somebody, is that they'll come in and they will pop a preset on there. Jesus, why would the contrast be that high? Okay, pop a preset on there, and in doing so, maybe they like the way it looks, the colors, the tones of everything, but then it does something funky to the skin. And that's what happened there. Like, yeah, it just kind of brought back some of the skin tone, but it also kind of muddied it up a little bit. So working in the HSL sliders will really help you out there to bring some life back in, or if it gets bright too many places, to bring it back down. So I'm just going to do it really extreme so you can see how it affects the skin. You see that? And then the opposite direction, how it wipes out the skin. So you find the happy medium just to bring the skin tone back without creating any kind of overdone like that. Oof. So you see how strong luminance can affect skin tone. And you'll look at the, if you look at my sliders on the right, you will see that they are red and orange in there. So that's that undertone happening there. Okay, so I just wanted to show you with this picture what you can do as far as skin tone goes. But let's go into this photo. Now in this one, I think the skin tone looks quite good actually. It actually is a pretty strong raw file already. There's a lot of sharpness still where it needs to be, which is the eyes. We're going to talk about taking portrait photos, obviously, in our portrait section, but just to kind of give you a little handle here, the eyes should be in focus unless you're doing something creative where the eyes are not important. In a straight portrait, the eyes are what we are being drawn into, so those should be sharp and in focus. You also may want to make them a little bit brighter. Now, the first step to having nice bright eyes is having this catch light. So if you look in here, you can see there's this little bit of light there. If you look closely in this eye, can you guys tell actually what is causing that catch light? That is a reflector, literally just a round silver reflector. So you can use a reflector, and there's me in the iris. You can use a reflector. You can use obviously off-camera flash, on-camera flash, either way. Or if you don't have any of that stuff, there's easy ways to get light to bounce into someone's eyes. The concrete on the ground, a white wall that they can stand next to. Keep an eye on the sun. Where is the sun hitting? How is it bouncing? So the first step to having nice bright eyes in a portrait is the catch light. And there we go. Without a catch light, you can easily start to look dull, lifeless. You can even fall into that uncanny valley territory. So having a nice bright catch light is a great start. So with the eyes, there's a few things that you can do to really make those eyes brighten up and show beautiful life. And her eyes are a gorgeous color, so you want to, showcase all of this. in a processing software like Lightroom, the best way to kind of manage that is with masks. So we kind of touched on masks last lesson, but we're going to use them here again. And you see all these fun different types of masks, and there's AI masks now, and where you can actually just enhance people and eyes and let AI do it for you. I'm gonna just show you kind of the old-fashioned way of doing it. So if I have a brush, and this is just a round brush, you want to make sure the feather is quite wide. There we go. And you can change the size and everything, and the density and the flow. I'm just going to keep it the way it is right now. I'm going to just paint onto the eyes here. Okay. All right. So you'll notice I just did the eye. I didn't do the whites of the eyes in this case. So we can just look at how we can control the brightness of the eyes, just that part and not the whiteness. Her eyes are quite white, so adjusting those would probably get us into over-processed territory pretty quickly. But the things that we want to kind of bring out, we want to brighten them up. So I'm going to pull up the highlights and the whites a little bit, and you can see, watch me go all the way. You know, see how intense that can be. And you'll notice, like in this area here, right under the eye, the tear duct area, it brightens there a little bit because of the way that my mask was. So depending on how specific you are, that can be a tell that you've done some work, if that's too bright and there's too much there and not anywhere else. So just keep an eye on that. So the highlights and the whites, just again, I'll pull it all the way up just so you can see. I'm just going to go intense on this so you can see. The other ones that really help you out here are texture and clarity specifically. So if I want to make sure that they're nice and sharp and brightness, texture, clarity, and then sharpness down here, we'll do a lot of heavy lifting. Watch what happens with clarity though. Yeah. Okay, so you have to be really careful with clarity. You notice how dark it gets versus bright and soft if you go this way. So I just do it a little bit just to add some texture, and then sharpness. And again, I'm just gonna go all the way just so you can see how bad it can get. Let's zoom out so you can see like actually the before and after. And I'm sure you have seen people put out photos like this where the eyes look like that, and it's too much. I'm just gonna say it's intense. It doesn't look real, so you want to be careful. We're just gonna pull this back down, and we're gonna go back up, lower the texture, and then the real culprits right here right now are the highlights and the whites being so far up. Okay, so if it's a little subtler like that, you see it's still beautiful. It still has an impact and has an effect and brings out the color of her eye more, without being over the top. Just like that. Okay, some other things that maybe come up, I think we'll probably save it for the next photo. Let's get out of my mask here. Yeah, so she has beautiful skin texture. There's no blemishes. There are some flyaways. We're going to look at flyaways when we go into the next picture because those are the worst. Yeah. So then the other things, you know, I've done her eyes here, really, is it? But other things we can do. I think the eyes are a little bit much right now because nothing else has been done. But that was just to show you kind of how that would work. And obviously we would go through our normal processing, white balance, maybe brightening it slightly, and some skin tone stuff. Let's see what happens when we throw that same, oof, man. These presets were not made for my portraits, I will say that much. Masks and labs. Yeah, okay. Not bad. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna just kind of look. That was just to show you the eyes. Let's go on to this portrait. Now this one, we're gonna do some more work on this in Lightroom, and then we're gonna bring it into Photoshop, and I'm gonna show you some things that you can do in Photoshop, as well as here in Lightroom. I just wanted to check one thing before we jump into that. Okay, actually, you know what? I'm gonna show you on this one some things that we would do that we could fix in Photoshop as well. So before we dive into it, we need to talk about what you do and how much you do it and when you do it. If you are working on a portrait, the things as far as removal of anything on a face or manipulation of anything on a face, you shouldn't be removing things that are permanent. So for example, on this picture, she has these beautiful dimples. She has a cute little birthmark on her nose. I'm not going to touch those. The eye ring, those are smile lines. Those are things that I'm not going to take away. Things that you would take away would be temporary things like a pimple. Okay. If a subject asks you specifically, like, hey, I know that I have these really dark circles that I'd really like you to try to get rid of, obviously at that point, go for it, but don't be removing things that are permanent features on someone's face. Things like these under eye lines and these side lines, we can soften them without fully removing them, because if I fully remove them, we're losing a lot of her natural character. But I can soften them so that they're not so dark, because that could be due to lighting and so forth. So we can go ahead and do that. Let's look at first the simple thing, blemish removal. It happens to everybody. We got to get rid of them. We want them gone. They make it very easy for us to do. The healing tool is your friend here. It's going to be in most processing softwares, and it is very good. So you can adjust for the size, paint it on there. It pulls, you see it's pulling from other skin. My recommendation is to move it to as close to that blemish as possible, and then let it do its job. Bam. Super easy. Did really no work. Now, as far as the lines, we can do stuff in Lightroom with that as well. And it's also something we can do in Photoshop. And I'll show you 2 different techniques for this. So in Lightroom, we can use the heal tool, but we're going to lower the opacity quite a bit because we're really just trying to soften it and not remove it. So again, I'm going to pull from as close as I can to make sure the skin tone and the light matches. Okay, let's look at the before and after here. You see how it's just a bit softer? That's because of the opacity. So if I brought it up more, let's go to 100 just so you can see. Okay, it's like completely gone now. Now that might be what you're going for. I would say this, as I know this person, that is a part of their face and shouldn't be removed fully unless she asked me to. So I'm gonna just bring the opacity back so that line is still there, because that line is part of her face. Okay, so before and after. Do the same thing in Photoshop, really, where you can go ahead and do the heal tool and you can lower the opacity and so forth just to fill it in. So there we go. With her eyes, she has dark brown eyes, right? So unlike the other subject who had these like blue-green eyes, you can do still the same thing though. Even with dark eyes, it works. I'm gonna go ahead and just do a quick paint over both so you can see. And you notice I did the whites of the eyes as well because there's less light in the eyes here than in the last one. So Just brighten them up a little bit, and you can even pull up the shadows. In this case, because her eyes are darker and there was more shadow in her eye than in the other portrait, you can see the catch light is again that same reflector. Actually, we can just brighten up those brown eyes and sharpen them up a little bit if we want. Let's come back and look at the before and after. So look at the under eye on the right eye. I would say that the browns are too bright. It looks a little fake. I would go back and adjust down on that. But there we go. All right, let's move on to this portrait. Now, I'm gonna just do a couple quick color corrections on this, just because I wanna show you the process of processing the photo in Lightroom and then bringing it into Photoshop to do more intense work on it. So I'm just gonna quickly do a little bit of some color correction. Okay, those are just some small edits, just to show you what it's going to look like when we then move it into Photoshop. So a couple things that we'll do here, actually just for the sake of it, let's do the eyes in here too, just so you can see even how these kinds of edits happen. So so you can even do selective edits in Lightroom before you pull it in to Photoshop. So here we go. Just gonna do the same thing we did before. Okay. All right, and then I've noticed I lost some of the skin color here, probably due to the brightening of the exposure, so I'm just going to try to get some skin tone back there. Okay, so we have some basic edits. Let's pretend I spent more time on it and did more stuff to it. There we go. I'm going to go ahead to bring this in to Photoshop. I'm sorry, I usually do this in a different way. Here we go. I'm just going to come out of this. Okay. There we go. That's usually how I do it. I was trying to show you through the menu bar. Right click, edit in Adobe Photoshop. So I was going to open up Photoshop. You'll see how long it takes on my 2015 MacBook Air 11-inch. Thinking about it. I like to think that my computer situation is just proof that you can do it on anything. There we go. Okay, so here we go. We have it in Photoshop. Now, the main thing, if you're not sure, the main difference between these two programs is the layering system. So I can have multiple layers, non-destructive editing. Lightroom is also non-destructive, and pretty much every processing software that you might be using is also non-destructive. But like Photoshop allows me to create layers that I can work on, so they don't even affect each other. I can turn them on and off as I want. I can duplicate the original layer so I can actually work on the photo if I want to, or I can work on layers. Working on layers is usually the right way to go. So let's start with the under eye. We looked at the under eye in the other picture. Here we're going to use the same idea. We're going to use the heal tool. So you see there's a bunch of different healing tools here. We're going to use the brush for this. And come in. And I'm just going to make it bigger, softer. Okay. And I was sampling the current layer, so it wasn't doing anything. You need to sample all layers or else nothing's going to happen. Okay, so I'm sampling all layers now. And I'm just grabbing a target near where the skin is bright but close to the eye, and I'm doing that with the Option key. And then I'm just painting it on and so on. I'm doing this pretty messy right now, but this is just to show you the process. That's really messy. But the cool thing is, if I really mess it up, I can turn it off. And then I can just lower the opacity so it's there but not overly done, right? Same thing, I can go in with the eyes. I can do all of that. If I want to tackle any blemishes, the spot heal tool is the way to go. Again, make sure you're sampling all layers. Just for the sake of it, I'm just going to do this all on the same layer right now. I'm going to change the hardness again. Don't know why it's up so high, but then I'm just going to paint the spot heal tool. That one just does it for you. Get rid of any extra blemishes here like that. That was a mole, so I can undo that and leave that on there. Yeah. Okay. Now, one thing that I write about in the lesson is frequency separation. I'm not going to show you that because there are way better resources than listening to me ramble about it. So watch the video if it's interesting to you. Watch the video that I linked. That's a great resource for that. But the dodging and burning, I just want to show you what that looks like. So after you watch this, you're going to read obviously what we wrote. And one thing that we talk about is dodging and burning in order to show some contours in the face. So if you're familiar with makeup, you're probably familiar with contouring, where you put the dark lines under your cheekbones and under your chin, and then the lights on your nose and right under your eyes and so forth, just to bring out the natural contours. I actually think that the other photo will be a better way to show you this because her skin is quite bright here. So I'm going to bring this photo into Photoshop just to show you what this would look like if you decide you want to try it. It's actually quite a bit of fun to do, just like doing makeup would be. So we're going to let that come into Photoshop and we'll try it out there. And then after we do this, the last thing we're going to talk about is flyaways. So we're going to come back to the other photo for that. But here we go. We have this photo. Dodging and burning. So dodging is brightening, burning is darkening. Here they are, dodging, burning tools. So I'm going to go ahead, and you can do this in masks, you can do this in whatever, but I just for the sake of showing you what it looks like, I'm just going to do it directly on the photo because I want you to have an understanding of what it even is. So if I want to give her some super defined cheekbones, for example, I can go ahead and start burning like right where her cheekbone would be. You see the color changing there. I usually like to put one like on the widow's peak and right under the nose, like that. And then you can do the sides of the nose. Think about just those familiar with makeup, what that looks like. It's the same places essentially, that you would have done that. And you can even use it to like fill in gaps in hair and stuff like that, just darken up like in her part there and so on. So quick, again, this is just to show you, so please don't judge my messy work. This is just to show you what it might look like. All right, and then I'll do the same with highlights by dodging, just to show you what the actual tools do. Okay, so a little bit on the nose, under the eye, and that's a great way to help with under eye, chin, forehead. Okay, so there it is, with and without. I'm not going to get into it, but you can try. Soft Light does a nice job with this. Just putting it on the layer mode on Soft Light and lowering it does a really nice job of that. You see, you can also keep it on normal and then just lower the opacity to the point where it doesn't look fake. So you see, it's very subtle. It can be, or it can be very intense. Right? But, you know, if I put it back on Soft Light and I lower the opacity, you still get the shadows created under her chin, under her cheekbones, and so forth. But it looks natural. Okay? All right, now the worst thing that a photographer has to deal with: flyaways. These hairs that are all over the place. For the sake of this, I'm going to get rid of everything else just so you can see. Oops. Okay, just so you can see what we're talking about. Here's one right here, right on the face. That's the worst. Okay, so I want to get rid of this flyaway. I'm going to use my spot heal tool that I used before. I'm going to make sure I have content aware on, and I'm going to make sure I'm sampling all layers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it nice and small. The hair is small. And I am going to just draw over that hair. This is the most tedious process. That if you're doing natural portraits of your friends, who cares? If you're doing an actor's headshot, you need to do it. You need to fix it. And it takes quite a bit of time. I am sure at this point there is some AI that helps with it, but I don't know what it is. All right, so there we go. Now imagine having to do that for tons of little hairs. It is not fun. It is not a fun process. It is a very tedious process. But it makes quite a bit of difference when you do it properly. Because those little hairs can be very distracting. They can take away from the photo. If you're doing like I said, like an actor's headshot, those need to be clean. And that includes their hair. So do it like that. When it cuts over other hair, I find going up and down like this. I don't know what the theory is, if that actually makes a difference, but I feel like it helps. There we go. You see? So it takes a lot of time. It's incredibly tedious. So I will say, try to pay attention if there's any in the face when you're actually photographing. Take care of it then. Because it really is not a fun process to come back and do it later. So this was an actor's headshot, for example, and you see this one by the eye. I spent, when I actually processed this photo back then when I did it, spent a lot of time with these hidden ones that I didn't even see, because this is a headshot. So I had to make sure that it was as clean as possible. She was using this for auditions and such, so you have to make sure that you're taking care of it. And anything little like that, you can also spot heal away. Oh, there we go. It's time for the beach ball of death. Okay. I was surprised it didn't come earlier, to be honest. But yeah, so just going through and getting rid of them little by little here is a fun process that we all love. Spoilers, we all hate it. It's terrible. But there you go. It looks good. It makes a big difference. Like that. So let's say that I've gone through and I've done everything that I wanted to do in Photoshop, and I want to bring this back into Lightroom. When I save it, I go back into Lightroom, it will be there as the new edit as a second file. Some other things you can do that are fun. With the under eye, there's actually a couple other ways that work well with the under eye, where you're setting your brush to screen instead, and then it takes out the darkness without damaging the skin at all. These are more advanced techniques, so I'm not going to go into those right now, but there are a lot of resources out there in the world that will help you with this. Other things like, you can honestly play around with everything. You can play around with the eye color and such in here, just by painting and using masks and so forth. But the main things that you need to remember are eyes nice and bright. Get rid of any temporary things, blemishes, for example, but leave the permanent stuff. And if you're doing like a serious picture, try to get those flyaways out. If it's just like a fun casual picture of your friends and so forth, obviously that is not necessary. So you go see here in Lightroom, we have the Photoshop version and the raw with my edits on it. They bring it in as a TIFF file. So there we go. Okay, so like I said, this was just to kind of give you an idea of some basic, I really hate this preset on here, it's driving me nuts. Just some basic ways that you can kind of deal with portraits specifically. The big things, again, just to recap, are skin tone, bringing back any kind of washed out or muddied skin, eyes nice and bright, which you can do with brush tools, under eye bags. You can also just do in here with brush tools or heel tools, excuse me, or you can do some more advanced stuff. And then teeth whitening, you can do that as well with some brushing, anything like that. There are way more advanced versions of this if you're doing high fashion, if you're doing headshots. I highly recommend looking at some different resources. I know Lindsay Adler has some really good resources. She's a fashion photographer. Flern, which you will see a link to in this class, is also excellent resources on these kinds of things. So good luck. I look forward to seeing your portraits and seeing your edits on them, and thank you.